Howdy, folks. I'm Mark, and today I am joined by the bodacious buds of the Bitcast, Jake Martin and Landry Smith. Guys, thanks for coming on back.
Dude, thanks for having us back, and thanks for that sick alliteration.
Of course.
Got to appreciate the alliteration.
I was thinking a bit for a B word, and I went with bodacious. I hope that fits well. I'll actually tell you what it means. Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining me for this short talk about video games, because you listen to Quick Play, so let's get right into it. First, I would like to open this episode with a reading from the Holy Scriptures, the book of Ecclesiastes, beginning of chapter 1, verse 1. Here we go. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Skipping ahead a bit, going down to verse 7. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear is full of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. The word of the Lord.
Dude, I love reading Ecclesiastes for a nice pick-me-up. It's so nice.
So anyway, Jake, you have a take about the current landscape of games. Why don't you lead us off? What's on your mind here?
Yeah, man, that is a great reading, Mark, and I'm glad that you brought that up. So, I guess this was last week. This all was last week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Just
it
about.
Feels like a lifetime's happened. Our family's been through a stomach bug, so it feels like we lived a lifetime.
That's a time warp. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think. So at work, here's the context. At work, I listen to game music a lot. And I find myself more and more going back to stuff that I grew up playing because I have nostalgia for that stuff. I enjoy hearing it. When I hear it, I recognize a tune almost instantly, and it's like, oh, this is great. Yeah, I'm having a fun time. And so it makes me nostalgic for those things. And then I begin to think about the games I'm playing today versus the games that I played back in the day. And then I get this just this weird juxtaposition of like, man, I feel like when I played games when I was a kid, when I was in the 90s up into mid-2000s, I really had like this experience that could only be described like childlike wonder. Everything was new and everything was exciting. We had 3D games and we were brought into this new territory of discovery and development. And, this whole world was opened up to us literally of like, what could games be if they were 3D? And since the inception, I think really of these 64, it's felt like with each generation, there have been some small like novelties here and there, like the Wii. The Wii was awesome.
Of course.
But it just feels like how we've interacted with games and how we've progressed has just slowly declined because we're only iterating and we're not creating new ways to engage with video games. There's nothing that's pushing the medium forward anymore outside of better visuals, and that's for me not enough to like keep me excited. I feel like a lot of the time, so I was kind of down. I was kind of sad and down and out, and I just kind of was just like, man, there's nothing ever going to be fun or new again. And that's kind of where this whole thing started. And Ecclesiastes is great for that.
We have the Kohelet to thank for that. Landry, what do you think? You've got Jake's take here. How are you feeling about the current landscape?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Jake said, and especially I think that generation between the Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64 is a good one to kind of pinpoint and highlight because to me, that's a generation where the hardware, and PlayStation 1 as well, it forced developers to come up with new gameplay ideas because it flipped the whole entire dimension, right? So I mean, at the beginning of the 3D generation, you had games like a 3D platformer looked similar to like a Crash Bandicoot, where it was like a very logical progression from a 2D platformer where you just kind of like, oh, let's just turn this over and then we'll put him in a 3D corridor and, he's going to walk in a straight line. And that was great. Those games were really fun. But then you had other developers like the Insomniac with Spyro and Super Mario 64, where like, let's put this character in a 3D space and see how they can interact with an entire environment. And these were all like novel concepts. And it seemed like every game you flipped on or rented, and then Nintendo 64 was just like Jake said, it's like it sparked this childlike wonder, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing this. Or, I mean, the highlights of that generation for me were like Super Mario Kart and Ocarina of Time and Super Mario 64. But like the moments you turn those on for the first time, like I literally remember starting those games up for the first time. All three of those games, like they're just these incredible moments where it's like, wow, I never thought that A Link to the Past follow-up would look like this, or I never thought I'd finally get the moment to have my hands on the controller and play Super Mario Kart 64 or Mario 64, because it was something I'd waited for so long. And it's just it hit on there's something about the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation that just they sounded different than anything you'd ever heard before as well. The audio was better, of course, but they had just like their own unique sounds as well. So
Man, I even think about just even sound chip wise, and like everything that y'all are talking about is we had these major pivot points through history with these consoles, like jump from 2D to 3D, from Super Nintendo, N64, from nothing to PlayStation 1 or whatever. These were these seismic like console generation shifts, and they're just like, it's been less seismic kind of ever since. Like obviously that next generation was games looked a lot better. Games like could do a lot more in the background. And now it's kind of feels like the jumps to each console generation. Really the last big one that felt like was kind of the PS3, Xbox 360. I know the Wii's in there too. That's a wild jump to the left instead of jump forward. I love the Wii. I'm an apologist for the Wii, but it's not quite the same stepping stone in a way. But kind of since then, it's just been iterating kind of on the same idea and concept of like games can just be realistic now, or even like a lot of times it's this processing power in the background. That's sort of really hard to like tell because there's just less of the game designers have less of the prompt incentive of like, we got to make a game for this new console that is pulling us to a goal of like, we got to make a 3D Mario because now we can make 3D games. And then they made one of the greatest games of all time. Yep. Like, what did, like, for y'all, like, what's the last game that felt like really new? Like, you've mentioned like Mario and Zelda, like N64. Has anything really since then kind of stuck with you of like, this is something brand new?
Well, I mentioned the Wii. And I think that's the closest thing to me that's felt that way in a long time, because it was, again, changing the way that you were interacting with a video game. Again, it was this idea of like, okay, I'm used to a controller. I've already been in 3D spaces before, so this all feels kind of familiar. But then when you actually change to having two controllers, being able to do that like in the game, like that was like a different way that felt somewhat new. Like I remember that first year or two of the Wii was like insane. Like the first time you played Wii Sports, you were like, I get this. Like this is really, really cool that I can bowl in my living room on this TV, and it feels like I'm having an impact on what's happening there. But that's the last thing I can feel like that like really blew me away from a video games like standpoint that was like new.
Yeah.
Landry, you got anything?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the PS3 generation a lot when I was kind of thinking about this question. And for me, one of the things that I love revisiting and paying attention to in the history of video games is like, how is storytelling evolving through the medium? Because I feel like it's a unique medium for storytelling. And I think in that PS3 generation, we had a couple of games that I cite as like some of my favorite games, but I think in retrospect may have actually been not so great for the direction the industry is heading, because since they've come out, it seems like, especially PlayStation,
just chasing it,
has just been like, oh, we'll do this idea, but we'll do it bigger and we'll do it on a more serious level with like a more serious tone. And those games are Uncharted 2 was, I think, Uncharted 1 really would be the one that kind of like started it. But 2 is where it was like, oh, I get where this is going and what this is now. It's incredible. And then The Last of Us just kind of like hammered that home, where it was like this experience that moved me on a level that I'd never been moved on with a video game. And, the acting in that one was just phenomenal. In the way both of those games, that Naughty Dog kind of in that generation created this experience where you're kind of weaving in and out of gameplay into like a narrative cutscene, but it was much more seamless than it had been done before. I think that was quite innovative. It may have been it may have been a logical progression from where we were before, and it didn't flip the industry on its head like the 3D gaming revolution did, but it still, I think, was a very important step in video games. That PS3 generation had games for me that were first time experiences, like Skyrim, just being in this giant fantasy world that felt like Lord of the Rings, and being able to go anywhere right from the moment. And that was the first RPG I ever played where it was like it's the enemy scaled with you. So it's like I can go anywhere right from the beginning, and it's hard, so you're going to get like killed pretty quickly, but you just let go, and there's that freedom. And then Breath of the Wild, I think, was another one that's just like the open air concept, where it took that Skyrim concept for me and it blew it up to this other level where it was like, oh, there's a level of control and a level of like there not being as many invisible walls and stuff. Like the way that the physics of that world just makes sense to you within a couple of hours of being in that game world. I still don't think there's anything on its level.
Yeah.
No.
Man, good examples. That's still like, I mean, a lot of the major games you even noted too are the ones that seem to keep getting released over and over again. Or like The Last of Us has gotten a new not a new Last of Us, but like the same Last of Us Part 1 has been released like 2 more times. And then Skyrim, the joke is it keeps getting released over and over again. And so if even like, that's almost a straw man argument for like, yeah, we keep on just reiterating on the same games. Like they just keep releasing the same games over and over again. It's like they have literally been doing that. But it's hard to think through of like the biggest games that have been really new. My example I was even thinking was just from last year being Chants of Sennaar, which is kind of smaller indie game that got a lot of buzz. That was like this logic linguistics puzzle game that I have like just haven't experienced before, but I'm also like not super into puzzle games, so this may have been kind of done before, but that's like I had to dig deep to think of something. And Chants of Sennaar was like very successful, very highly regarded. People love that game and champion all the time. But it's like that's an indie game. Like these bigger companies aren't really going after the linguistic puzzle games. But like
next from Naughty Dog, linguistic puzzle games.
I mean, just you wait. But
like you've never seen murder, betrayal, words.
And then followed up by the very highly successful HBO series based on.
Yes, we'll make it into a movie also.
So, I guess especially with the big companies, like how did we get here? Like, what else do you think what are these companies doing? What decisions are they making?
Money, Mark.
Oh,
it's all,
of course.
It's the money, brother. All right, listen. Here's the thing.
Yes.
Thing. There was a shift, and it's what when Landry was describing. Okay, there's always been money ever since Nintendo saved the gaming market, essentially. But the market was never that big because video games were always kind of like, you're kind of a nerd if you're playing video games, and like some people play them, some people don't. But then this huge shift happened in the 90s where a lot of us grew up and were like, this is sick. We like video games now. And then we grew up with them. Literally, the games became bigger and better and more mature and more advanced, and like they pushed the cinematic and like art forward of the medium essentially. And then, yeah, you had big budget games being made that were essentially being treated like movies, and then they're making more money. They're making more money than television and like the film industry combined. So then people are like, oh, wait a minute. We can make money doing this and selling these games to these nerds? And wait, everyone plays video games now? Oh, interesting. And then that's it. Sequelization of games. You know, they're afraid of taking risks. They want to do what's going to push the needle forward just a little bit. Investors got to keep them happy. And here we are. We're in the tail end of capitalism in the games industry, where all we're doing is just small iterations to make people happy. And it's all doo-doo. That's my take.
And not only that, but it's like it's gotten to a point to where I think even the consumer is a little unhappy with the direction that these companies are going in, which is like, let's swell these games up to such a level that it costs an exorbitant amount to make. It takes 6 years to develop, and then you get this product that's like 20 hours too long. And and the demographic they're marketing towards now is mostly people like us, 25 to 35 is probably their real target demographic, which I've unfortunately aged out of. But those people don't have enough time to play these games. So most people anyway. And so you're choosing 2 or 3 games a year to play, and that everybody wants a piece of the pie. And, in a normal, healthy industry, a game that sells 10 million copies should be like
a huge success.
Not a runaway success. But now you're seeing some of these companies where it's like, if they don't recreate the same success when they had that innovative game that caught the world by storm with like their lightning in a bottle concept and idea, if they can't recreate that, then suddenly, half the studio gets axed. And or like you have a situation with like the Witcher 3 developer, blanking on the name right now,
where Project Red.
They get like, it's like this small kind of like studio who just like punches way above their weight with Witcher 3, and then they wind up hiring like just a ton of people, and they have this project that's ballooned to just an incredible like scale, and it's no wonder they can't keep up with it and produce like a good product with Cyberpunk 20, which I'm sure it's good now. I know it's good now, but
took them many years to fix that.
Yeah, and it was a complete and utter failure and embarrassing debacle when that game launched.
But like a good example of this is today, Dragon Age: The Veilguard came out today, and it's getting good scores for the most part across the board. But it's already like people are saying that it is a step down from where they were with Inquisition, which came out in like 2012, 2014 or something like that.
Yeah.
This is 10 years we've been waiting for this game, and in the meantime they've also sort of killed off the Mass Effect franchise with how those ballooned in size and scale, and they tried to make it bigger and better, and in turn they made it just less of what people actually wanted. And so then you have this fan base that Landry's talking about, where we started out loving this for like what it was, its simplicity, its originality, and then it's really hard to satiate an audience that's like us, that's wanting something new and unique. And I don't know how sustainable that is, but it's like, what do you want? Do you want the new thing that feels like the old thing, or do you want the next sequel or the step forward for this franchise? And you get both camps in development, it seems like, or like in the industry. Yeah. People are like, I love this. This is a cool new direction. And people are like, I hate this. This is the dumbest artwork I've ever seen. It looks like I'm playing a Shrek game. That's what people are saying about the new Dragon Age game.
I like the artwork personally.
I did too. I thought it looked kind of nice.
People love Shrek now.
Yeah, people like Shrek. He's cool.
It's obviously this is where the money is like what is tried and true, and that's the less like there's less risk there. Like you don't have to risk spending years in something that ends up just being too different to be palatable. There's 2 sources I want to cite real quick as we think through this. There is a YouTube video called Everything is a Remix, which the thesis sounds like where it's like there's just nothing truly new. Like everything is just a reiteration of what's been done before. That video itself has been redone a few times. I was actually watching it to refresh myself before we hopped on here. I remember seeing it for the first time like 12 years ago in high school, and he just released a new version like last year. That he's kind of becoming a little bit of an AI apologist, so take that with a grain of salt. He also is like AI is limited, so he's not whole hog into it. The other thing is I mentioned this before on this podcast, but the book Hitmakers by Derek Thompson, it's a book about like how things go viral. And the main point is you can't force things to go viral. But a common theme is that the stuff that goes viral is stuff that's mostly the same, just slightly different. And so it's like it's a really hard balance for success where it's like you don't want to be too new, too different so that just people are wigged out. They don't know what's going on. But sometimes that just ends up looking like you're cobbling together a lot of familiar parts to make something new. In that everything's a remix video, he also mentions that we interpret new things based on things we know, which is like, of course. So we need to have this connective tissue of the already familiar, which is why it's just so hard to break away and so hard to even get, like when you do break away, to get those to actually hit, because like we still need to have this bridge. So we're running a little long here, so I want to make the executive decision. We have one more kind of section of this I want to get to. Let's just pack this up right now. We'll reconvene next week, same time, same channel, and we'll kind of talk about what the future looks like. But before we go here, any final thoughts on just the current state? How do we get here?
No, I said it. Money.
Yeah, same.
Sweet. Well, nice. Well, I will see y'all in a full 7 days, very long time from now. But real quick, what are y'all playing? One name, one game.
Landry, you go first.
Dude, what am I playing? I'm like blanking completely.
I just finished Dead Space. That was terrible and scary. And
Nice.
We're going to talk about that.
There you go.
Luigi's Mansion 3.
Oh,
So
good.
good.
Seasonal. Good stuff.
It's so good.
Well, I've been playing some Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom.
Nice.
Mid.
Fine. Dang. Well, thank you all for joining me. Where else are you out on the internet?
Biblogist everywhere. BITBLOGGIST.
Very nice. Landry, how about you?
I'm out these days, dude. You can't find me anywhere.
We can find you on the Bitcast, which is a monthly podcast.
That's true.
On video
And
games.
here. I pop in
Of
here.
course. Of course. Well, thank you all for listening in. You can follow us on the major podcasting services. You can find us on the proper socials at Quick Play Pod, and let us know when's the last time you played a truly new game. And we'll see you next week with these same guys. That's all the time we have for right now. Thanks. Bye.